continuing the Immigrants Who Kick Ass series. Joining KB today is Natalia Karayaneva, founder and CEO of proptech company Propy, advisor to Arrington XRP Capital, and noteworthy Forbes Contributor. Now, here's your host, KB.
Hey, Natalia, it's great to have you.
Hi, thanks for having me here today.
Awesome. I'm really excited to talk to you. There's so many questions I want to ask. Can we start out, maybe tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. I'm a software engineer by education, and I'm a serial entrepreneur. Started my first company at the age of 19. My first company in software, I actually transitioned into real estate development many years ago. And 4 years ago, after living in Bulgaria, Dubai, studying in Oxford, I decided to launch Propy and relocate myself in the United States. So now I live and work in Silicon Valley, and very happy about what currently I'm working on.
You've done so much in the few years that you've been in the U.S. Did you start Propy after moving to U.S., or did you have the idea before?
The idea was born before, actually in London, in Oxford. I had my executive education there, an additional one, and this is where I actually started to think about building something that would impact the real estate industry, like more in global perspective. And that was one of the ideas. And I started to talk to a number of people in London, kind of got the idea validated. Then I came here in the US just by chance to a real estate conference in Man. And this is where I felt that that's the place to actually start the company and to go full on.
Are you still glad you moved to U.S. after a few years?
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're not?
Oh, no, I absolutely am, and I'm so glad to be talking. I mean, there's so many entrepreneurs in the U.S., and that's awesome. I mean, that's what I'm really passionate about. But I'm super passionate to talk to people who came from other countries and have done, wonderful new things in the U.S., which I think U.S. is obviously one of the few places in the world where things like this can be done. Could you tell me a bit about what Propy does? And we're going to deep dive in a few, but at a high level so people can understand what your business is about.
Yeah, our mission at Propy is to automate the home buying process and imagine in the future real estate purchase will be very easy. It will be like Amazon. International, global, with a couple of clicks, you're acquiring a property and you're receiving your title deed instantly after the payment. So we believe in that future innovation in the industry, and we decided to focus on specific automation aspects. And a few years ago, actually, we decided to also incorporate the technology blockchain in order to accomplish our mission.
So could you tell me a little more specifically, I guess, you guys are 100% blockchain based, or is blockchain like one of the options? And so let's say, I mean, and I know a little bit about what you do, so I just want to make sure people understand, exactly what it is. So if I'm a buyer or a seller of a piece of real estate, a residential house or something like that, how would you guys help in a transaction process?
Yeah, absolutely. So blockchain is just one of the technologies that we're using, but it's always there on back end, and the consumer doesn't actually realize and interfere with this technology. The way we currently are selling our product, which is transaction platform, is to sell to brokerages and agents. And so if you're a consumer, you would actually first ask your agent, hey, I'm ready to close. I'm ready with my decision. Now let's close it on Propy. Are you a user of Propy? It's like DocuSign when you just sign documents with a link received by email. Similar with Propy, you just receive a number of links that you need to execute. So you would make an offer on our platform, you would receive payment instruction on our platform, and thus you would avoid the wire fraud risk. And so the platform really provides the transparency to the consumer. Once you are in the system, you see the entire process of closing and what your agent is doing, what's the other agent is executing, the title agent work and the seller work. It's all visible in one platform, step by step.
Awesome. And so people don't really even, I mean, like this isn't necessarily for blockchain users or experts or technical people. This could be for non-technical folks as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In the interface, you literally do not see the infrastructure or backend like blockchain. The only place where you face blockchain is the title deed in the end, where actually contains a blockchain address.
Awesome. And so I mean, I really want to understand kind of a little bit more on the details, because I love what you're doing. I mean, I think real estate is it's like one of the few, very, very legacy transactional environments that's left in the U.S. or maybe the rest of the world as well. And, I've gone through a few transactions. I have some involvement with real estate with my company as well. So I know what a pain it could be to do all of these things, because it involves so much paperwork, so many different people. And not only do these people, they all want to make a living, so they all kind of take a piece of the transaction, and it takes so long. I mean, you were involved in the real estate, but also software, it sounds like, but how did you hone in on this specific problem? It's a huge problem.
Yeah, that's true. And it's not a very obvious problem that one startup would tackle in, because it's a huge industry. It's a very fragmented industry, especially in the United States. And every single transaction is dependable on the brokerage agents, and the buyer and the seller, and everyone has their own agenda, piece of the transaction in terms of fees. So it was not that obvious way to get where we are today, but we just were driven by the mission, the automation of the purchase process. The way we came to the real automation is understanding that sooner or later there will be another Airbnb, but for real estate purchases, or it will be Amazon for real estate, and it's inevitable. The only part that is missing, a global platform for real estate, is the automation of the process. So we just started to dig into that. And the reason I chose this specific issue of the industry is actually my international experience in real estate. So I lived in Dubai. I know how transactions are happening in Dubai. And wherever I traveled around the world, I always would visit some properties for sales. I would meet local agents in Europe, in like even Maldives, and in exotic places in Asia, and would always compare what are the fees, what is the transaction process. And beyond that, actually real estate transaction has same pillars all over the world. It's payment, paperwork, and then title transfer. So the basics are the same.
How do you think U.S. compares to what you've seen internationally?
Oh, good question. Before I came to the U.S., I actually thought the U.S. market would be the last one we would come, because the market is so developed with all the tech startups in real estate. Even like having Zillow, it's a huge innovation and improvement of the industry, because as you know, globally, there are not many portals that are providing real-time data on listings. But then coming here, I've realized that actually the fragmentation of the market, huge delay, provoke a huge delay in innovation. And in terms of automation, nothing has been done besides adoption of DocuSign. So I saw the huge opportunity here.
And even with that, I mean, because I think that this notion of automation, I mean, that seems like to us techies, quote unquote, it seems natural that this space should be more automated than it is today. But I think to a lot of other people and potentially governments, from what I understand, even signing a document electronically, like signing the deed or doing the recording electronically, is a huge innovation. It's not adopted everywhere. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And here in the US, we're talking about 3,000 counties recording offices that are recording both on paper and collecting papers, scanning them and collecting those kind of digitized scanned document in registries, which is still not efficient. And we saw those cases in Baltimore. and in Vermont and other states and cities where there were a loss of data because of natural disasters or hacks or whatever. So these public data of land records are not preserved, and the type of fraud are happening everywhere. But besides this innovation towards the government and counties in developed countries, there is a massive potential for social impact in developing countries, because there are over $9 trillion of unrecorded land all over the world, and actually people cannot use their land or home as a collateral or even to sell it to have some liquidity in the market. So once we have reputable registries, it will be definitely a huge social impact for economies. And here it's not about digitalization. We've seen the digitalization here in the US, in Europe, but in countries like Ukraine, Russia, Bulgaria, problem is corruption. And even though there is a registry in place, with corruption, again, there are many fraud and special type of fraud are happening. And then other countries that don't have the level of digitalization, I think it's like a natural transition to blockchain would be something foreseen soon.
And do you think that by introducing technology or specifically blockchain to these countries that have some corruption that you mentioned, is that going to potentially solve the issue, or is it just going to, force the corruption to be different, I guess, from paper?
I think it has the opportunity to solve the problem. For example, registry in Bulgaria. Last year, it was hacked, and it wasn't a land registry, it was a trade registry, and that's for 2 months, the business could not do their operations when it comes to the registry data. And then when it was restored, many were complaining that the data was missing. And the software provider actually claimed that they don't have a backup of the data, which is looking suspicious, because that's a natural thing. So there were some groups of people that were interested the data to
disappear.
To disappear. And with blockchain, everything is traceable. Yes, some registry could be hacked, some data could be added, but you would immediately realize that data was altered or added. So,
do you think? Yeah, no, thank you for that. I understand completely. Do you think that you having so much knowledge internationally, I mean, all these places are different, and now coming to US and sort of building the company in US, and let me ask first, are you focusing on US, or are you focusing globally, or in some specific places?
Yeah, that's a good question. And obviously, the main lesson of the startup community, the focus, right? So the first year of operation, we were doing first transactions in the world, first in European Union, first in the US, just to make sure our platform is adaptive to any jurisdiction and have a stable fundamental infrastructure. But since then, we are actually focusing on the US. Pretty simple business model. We're selling the solution to brokerages and real estate developers who are mandating their agents to use the platform for all the deals in order to be compliant with the management.
Are you guys available in any state in the U.S., or are you focused on certain areas for now?
We've transacted in over 10 states as of today, and that's when we work with brokerages, especially nationwide. We're making sure that we can transact in any states in the United States. That was actually our exercise for over 12 months to make sure that the platform is working in the major states.
Where is most of your effort going? I mean, you are the CEO of the company. Are you focused on, I imagine there's a lot of potentially regulatory types of issues to address with the counties and the process and all that. Maybe there is some sales type of stuff to introduce and convince the agencies, the brokerages, that this is technology that could be viable for them long term. Where are you spending most of your own time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, about a year ago, about 20% of my time spent on regulatory research in different states, and I was closely working with the governments and authorities in California, in Washington, D.C., educating them on what we're doing, how they could improve the current laws, and also figuring out how our proposition is fitting the regulatory framework in real estate. And we're kind of past that research, and currently our platform is in operation, as I mentioned, in a number of states. So my primary focus is team building, hiring, and sales, as you just mentioned. So I'm constantly meeting and talking and doing demos with bigger accounts like brokerages, real estate developers, as well as we've just hired a rock star team of sales, proptech influencers that are providing us intros to those brokerages and leaders in the space. So that's the top priority. Plus, we're consisting of two teams, one in Palo Alto and one in Bulgaria. Us managing the team on both continents, and especially engineers, it's a little bit time-consuming, I would say, challenging, but in many sense rewarding.
Sure. No, it is not easy to manage any team, especially one with, on two different opposite ends of the world. What are some of the biggest challenges when you talk to these brokerages? Are they understanding? I mean, do you talk about blockchain and how it could be useful for these types of transactions? Are they kind of understanding, or is blockchain like a thing that they don't really understand and are maybe scared of? I've heard that kind of feedback. Yeah. What's your experience?
It's a great question. We have a lot of inbound interest from brokerages because of our news and articles. Unfortunately, Propy is primarily known only for blockchain innovation, and thus normally those brokerages just know that Propy is an association with blockchain. However, when we reach out to potential customers, we actually don't talk about blockchain until we feel that they would be interested to hear about it. So we go through the demo, we show them all the functionalities like audits, checklists, reports, dashboards for title companies, for buyers, sellers, agents. And then if we see that they want to dive into infrastructure and backend, then we would explain all about like QR codes and blockchain addresses and so on.
And at that point, they're usually receptive, or do they have hesitation?
Yeah, they are. Once they understand that it's just an infrastructure and agents don't have to deal with blockchain and they don't have to understand this technology, obviously there is no discussion. Especially they are actually very happy about our secondary mission to decentralize data, because our current competitors, traditional competitors, I would say, are SkySlope, owned by Fidelity, and Dotloop, owned by Zillow. So agents really dislike to give out transaction data to those corporations. And with the blockchain backend, we have the ability to anonymize data. And if we decide to sell it, we could always enrich the originators of the data.
Do you think that all the folks who are kind of involved in the process today for a real estate transaction to happen, I mean, there's title insurance, there's attorneys, there's agents, there's all these different people involved, and they've built big companies or small companies, and they've built a livelihood around all this stuff. And as things kind of move towards a streamlined technological solution potentially, are you fearful of the industry kind of being resistant to this type of change? Have you felt that yet, or do you think about it?
We used to feel it, absolutely, especially when we just rolled out transaction platform and we badly needed the first transaction to happen. It took us a few months to find who would be willing to do the transaction, and they even wanted legal opinion. So everybody was worried whether it's legal at all, especially when we have blockchain on the back end. And also they wouldn't trust a small startup with the transaction management of high value transactions. But then suddenly we got this US lawyer's opinion letter then we suddenly got one of the largest title companies willing to make transactions on the platform. The first agents, first buyers, and just started to take off. But definitely initially we were quite afraid of having this resistance. But those players like title companies and brokerages, they understand that a lot of stuff will be changed with technology and blockchain. And thus they're preferring to stay close, to work close and see where it will go, because it's not just us being a player willing to disrupt someone, but actually it's an industry play, and we don't disrupt or aim to disintermediate right away any of the players. We work with everyone because we do believe that collecting data together and have integrity of data, exchanging the data in a safe way between all the participants, it will only empower all of the participants. And yes, probably there won't be as much need of manual labor in the future, and maybe agents and title companies will start reducing their fees just because their work became more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, this is my personal opinion. I think that in the U.S. specifically, and perhaps other countries, I'm not too familiar with the real estate markets in Europe, but I imagine they're probably somewhat similar. The process of buying a home, instead of let's put aside the transaction itself, but like the process of finding a home using an agent, and then I feel like that process is not necessarily broken, but it's just too expensive because the agents charge something like a 5 or 6%. I mean, they charge the seller. As a buyer, right, you're still paying that because it drives up the price at the end of the day. Now we have platforms like Redfin and maybe some others that are kind of removing that or lowering the fee a little bit. I mean, what's your take on kind of how it's a huge industry, obviously. So again, there's so many people involved, but do you think that the process and the cost is unnecessarily high at this point?
Well, it seems to be really high, but when you look at actually where the money are going, it kind of all makes sense to some extent. And there are some lawsuits this year, I don't know if you've heard, with National Association of Realtors. And we see some notion of bringing transparency to the commission space, like Redfin announced that the buyers' commissions will be now transparent to the buyers, so they know actually how much their agent are receiving. And Redfin, yes, they save on commission, but it's not like half of the commission even. And when you look closely at the commission space, it's actually like 20% is going to the brokerage, to the management, to all this litigation side, and make sure that the transaction is clear. But then there are fees paid to title companies for title insurance and title search and title reporting. And that's the payment for inefficiency of the recording system in the US because of this fragmented 3,000 counties. While in Europe and other countries, normally it's a centralized registries system, torrent system, where lawyers or notaries just entering data lately electronically, and it's just more efficient. So the consumer is not paying thousands of dollars for recording or title report or title insurance. And obviously with technology, it will change. To answer quick in a shorter version, I do believe that technology will push the industry to lower commission. But as of now, agents are hardly earning a normal annual income, especially in some states, because they have to pay for different tools, for coordinators. It's something that technology needs to improve.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I'm not saying that the individual agents are getting rich. Some are, but for the most part, I agree with you that they're not. I mean, I live in Boston. So, for example, here, a home could cost $1 million and up. As I'm sure on the West Coast and a lot of other places, it's the same. And if it's a 5% commission, I mean, we're talking about a lot of money, $50,000 plus, that the intermediary takes. Now, again, as you said, it probably doesn't go in their own pocket. There's a bunch of other fees and people to pay that out to, but it's still a lot of money that I think, all of us as consumers at the end of the day pay. That's just I've been thinking about that for a while, and I'm really glad you guys are coming up with technological solutions to streamline the stuff. Could I ask, how has it been as far as, coming from another country fairly recently, only about, 4 years ago, you mentioned, and starting a startup which is fairly prominent and doing so much stuff in the US? How has the reception been from like the established players, these big agencies, brokerages, and others? How have you felt as a businesswoman with a startup here?
Interesting question, because those feelings sometimes are controversial. From one point of view, the community here, the startup community specifically, and real estate community is really curious about new people, and it's very easy to open first doors. But then it's a bit hard to being an outsider. It's a bit hard to get to next steps. But at the same time, I was amazed when I just came in Silicon Valley, when everybody were offering help and introductions. Like every single meeting would end with a question like, "How can I help?" And it's this welcoming community really inspired me from the very beginning.
Has it been a positive experience when you compare it to like being in London or being in Bulgaria? I don't know if you had businesses over there, but if you did, how does it compare?
Another interesting question, because conducting business in Dubai, Bulgaria, I kind of expected some neglection for women business leaders, and I didn't feel that. So I was really surprised, and it was the expectations were not high. So obviously, from a woman entrepreneurship perspective, I got surprised. And then being in Silicon Valley, sometimes I felt like women are still not getting the best outcomes in meetings. Sometimes I would feel those questions like, how would you fail, instead of how would you succeed, especially in the beginning, the first 1 or 2 years. But with traction and then building reputation, it's changing. And yes, there are many conversations about women empowerment and sexism and whatnot, but sometimes it feels that these are just conversations. So hopefully it will change further for good.
I think things are changing for the better. And actually, an interesting story, I've known about you and your company for maybe a couple of years. And I remember I was at a conference and I was talking to someone, I can't remember who, and I asked about Propy, and they started talking about you. I think they either knew you personally or met you, and they said that Natalia is one of the hardest working women in the blockchain space. I remember that. That was a couple of years ago.
Oh, cool.
So I'm sure you put a lot of hard work to get to where you are. I'm sure it was not all roses.
Yeah, absolutely. Persistence is one of our key founders aspect of the success. Because we're 3 female co-founders, and really those last 4 years it's been like 24/7 work. But when we see results, when we see our team being inspired with every single success, we just want to move forward.
So what's next for you guys? I mean, when can I buy the next house on Propy?
Oh, cool. Well, you can actually do it now if you ask your agent if they use Propy. Yeah, so what's next is really onboarding brokerages to have thousands of agents using the platform, really the consumers to learn about it and achieve this word of mouth that they're happy with the experience. We've never seen that in real estate so far. So this is our short-term goal for the next 1 year. And then long-term, we really see the future with like Bloomberg-like terminal, with real life transactions happening all over the world, and hopefully one of the pieces of this infrastructure, if not all, would be made by our team.
Awesome. Natalia, it was really great talking to you. I learned a lot. I think you guys are doing great stuff, and I wish you the best of luck.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for the great questions and great mood.
Thanks.